Hello everyone, my name is Harsh and welcome to session 13 or Flutter 101 Bootcamp. In today's session, I'll be telling you guys how you can perform various different CRUD operations inside your Flutter application. So CRUD operation basically stands for like create, read, update and delete. So these are the four operations which we'll be seeing how we can perform these operations on our local storage data, which will be in the form of a SQLite database. So in the yesterday's session I have covered how you can like basic things about how a SQLite database works and like how you can add the pubspec package inside your pubspec.yaml file. So in today's session we will be looking at how we can perform these CRUD operations inside our application. So now inside my application what I have done is I have created four different flat buttons. So these are the flat buttons and all of the on pressed functions or on pressed things for these flat buttons are set to null, as you can see here inside the code part. So whenever I'll be clicking on any of this button, it won't be doing anything as of now. So let's see how we can implement this part inside our Flutter application. So the first thing which we need to generate is a database helper file. So database helper file will be having all the commands which like all the SQLite command which will be running when we are performing a insert operation or when we are performing a delete update operation. So on the basis of those commands we will be creating various different files like the delete.dart file, inserting.dart file. So these will be having a particular specific code which will be triggering the command stored inside this database helper file through the button which is present inside this main.dart file. So let's begin by creating our database helper file. So the first thing which I'll be doing is I'll import dart.io, and after this we also need to import SQFLite. So SQFLite dart from package SQFLite. Along with this SQFLite, one more thing which I have added inside my pubspec.yaml file is this path provider. So path provider is used for like working or dealing with the paths, like wherever the storage of the file which will be created of the database file. So for storing that particular database file, this path provider will be used for like providing the path to that application or working with the paths inside our Flutter application. So I have used the path provider as well. So I'll import path.dart and path provider.dart. So I have imported these things. Next the thing which we need to do is we need to create a class name as database helper. So this is the class which will be having all the things. Next we need to name the versions of the database. So we'll be providing a name to the database, we'll be providing a version to the database, and we'll be creating a table and we'll be assigning a name to the table which we are making. So the names or these values won't be changeable, so I have added final and I am assigning underscore before the name so that this is only accessible to this particular class. It's up to you like how you want to name it or how you want to store it. So I am naming it my database dart. Similarly creating db version and setting the value to 1. Final table name needs to be small, and I'll name my table as my table. Next we need to assign the column ID and the column name. So we'll be having two columns. The first one will be column ID and the second one will be column name, and these are not changeable, so assigning them to like final. And I'll name my column as name only. And after this we need to create a private constructor for this database class. So I'll add database helper dot underscore private constructor, database control by database helper dot underscore private constructor. So we'll be creating it in a while. Now I need to initialize the instance for this database helper class, and this won't be changeable, so I'll be making it as static final. Naming it as instance. Database helper and setting it to dot private constructor underscore private constructor. Next we'll initialize a database inside this database helper class. So static database with the value of underscore database. It needs to be database, and yeah. Next we'll create a function which will be returning a database. The function will be of type future, so it will be returning a database, and it will be having a get functions so that we can get the value of the database from our function, naming it as database. It will be of type async as I mentioned, that's why we have added a future to it. And we'll be seeing if the underscore database value which we are having here is not equals to null. So if the database is not there, then it will be returning underscore database only, else it will be like initializing a database, so we need to make a function for it. So let me add the condition which will be taking place if the if condition is false. So await underscore initialize database. We need to create this function, and after it at last we need to return the database which will be created. Let's start working on the underscore initialize database function. So copying it from here, pasting it. It will also be of type async, and inside it we'll be taking the directory. So I'll initialize a directory inside it, naming it to directory only, and it will be of type await. So it will be getting the application documents directory, and through this application document directory we'll be joining that directory with the database name. So adding the database or joining it with the database name. So we have got the application document directory inside the directory field. And next thing which I'll be doing is I'll be setting or I'll be initializing a variable name as path, and this path will be equal to, or this path will be having join. So directory which we have above dot path comma underscore db name. So it will be creating a path of type string which will be equals to, or which will be having the combined value of directory dot path and db name, adding a semicolon here. Let's print the path as well. Path is $path, so that you get an idea where the file is being stored. After that we'll be opening that database and returning it as well. So I'll add a return. So open database, the path we'll be passing inside it. We'll be adding the version which will be equal to underscore db version. We'll be passing another function which will be equals to onCreate. So it is for creating the database inside our application, or for creating the tables inside our application with the specific version which we have specified above. So on create underscore on create, we need to make this function adding a semicolon at last. Let's start working on the on create function. Just a sec. Now this on create function type will be of a type future. So all of these things generally take some time for the things to complete in the background. So in that case we need to make it as future. If we are not doing so, the thing which would take place is that the app would stuck for some seconds until this particular condition is fulfilled, and that would make the app or the user experience look very bad. So we are using future so that these things can take place in the background and we can work. I have added database.execute, and inside this execute we can pass various different commands, SQL commands which we want to pass inside our application. So I'll add 3 quotes here, add an enter, and 3 quotes here, and after this we can pass the SQFLite commands whatever we want our application to have. So I'll create a table with the name underscore table name, and after this we need to pass what all values it will be having. So entering, and it will be having a column ID which will be of type integer, and it will be the primary key for this application. Next we will be having column name with the type of text, and it won't be null, so non null. So these are the commands which will be running when this initialize database will be running, this function will be running, and after it it will be initializing, or it will be creating a database for us or a table for us with the column ID of this particular ID and column name of this particular name. Next thing which we need to create is we need to have various different functions for inserting, deleting, and querying and updating the database. So let's start working on those functions. So here you can see that it is showing us some errors in the background. Let me hot restart my app to see if the error still occurs or like still are there. So you can see that the app has hot restarted and the errors are not occurring as of now. Let's start creating the insert, delete, update, and query all functions. So these all functions will be of type future only. So firstly I'll have insert command, so it will be returning a type of integer. So whatever value will be inserting inside this, it will be returning the ID of that particular insert made. It will take a map of string and dynamic named as row. As it is a future, I am adding an async after it. Database will be DB, and we'll await instance.database. So we'll be taking the database instance inside this DB variable, and after it what we can do is we can perform the insert operation on site in this database. So I'll return await, as it will be taking some time, and db dot insert, and for the table name I can pass underscore table name, and for the value I can pass row. So whatever I'll be passing inside this as a row, so it will be inserting that value inside this table which we have created above. Now let's work on the query all function. So it will be of type future only. We'll be having a list, so it will provide us with the list of values which will be having a map, and the map will be having string and dynamic values inside it. I'll name it as query all, It will also be of type async query all y and c. I need to add a parentheses here, and inside it we have to initialize, or we have to get the instance of the database inside the variable named as db, and then we can query, or we can return the queried data with passing an await to it and db.query. So it will be querying the values from this particular table. So also we can specify various different conditions here on the basis of which the query will be made, but for now, like giving you a gist of how you can work with the database, I am not initializing, or I am not assigning any conditions here. Now let's work on the delete operation, or the delete function inside it. So it will also be of a type future. It will return an integer, so it will be providing us with an ID of whatever is written or whatever is deleted. So I'll add delete here, and it will take an integer ID. So whatever thing which we want to delete, it will be taking an ID of that. It will also be of a type async, initializing it inside the value db, and then returning an await out of it, which will be equal to db.delete. So all the things related to performing CRUD operations are stored inside this db only. So db.delete, and we need to pass the table name here, and let me add a condition as well. So I'll assign where, so you can hover over delete to see what all thing it takes. So it is loading it. Let's wait for a while. So you can see that it takes a table name which is compulsory one, and the optional ones are where, and we can pass arguments also related to where. So we'll be checking, or we'll be assigning a string inside where. So it will be checking if the column ID is equals to null, or we can also assign some arguments. So where args equals to id, and at last adding a semicolon. So it is providing us with some error. Let's see what error it is giving. Too many positional arguments, one expected but found two. Okay, so it is not expecting that many amount of arguments. I guess this is because of this. Yeah, so now this is the delete function is also completed. We'll be testing this out a bit later. Let's create the query all functions first. So it will also be of a type future. I guess we have created the query all. We need to create the update function. So it will be of a type future, and it will be taking an integer, it will be returning an integer, and the things it will be taking is a map of type or value string and dynamic, adding an async after it, pasting or initializing the database thing. I need to get the ID, so I am writing int ID equals to row, and then I'll get the column ID from this. So I'll get a particular column ID from this. I haven't assigned the name row here. Once I have got the ID, what I can do is I can return the updated value. So return await db.update, and update will be taking a table name. So after a table name, what we need to pass is the table or the row where we want to make an update. We can also pass a where. So where will be having a condition underscore column ID equals to null, and we can pass where args. So inside where args we can pass an ID through a list, adding a semicolon. So these were the things which we need to make inside the database helper.dart file. Now let's start creating the things, like adding the data inside this updating dot and creating the functions which will be triggered once we are clicking on those particular flat buttons. So let me open this inserting dot file here, and the first thing which we need to do is we need to import database helper here. So I'm importing database helper dot. I'm creating a function name as inserting, and it will be of type async. After this, inside the function I'll initialize a variable integer I, which will be having the value of await, and through the database helper which we have imported, I'll initialize database helper dot instance or get an instance of it, and through this I can perform my insert operation. So this is the second method of doing that particular thing. So one thing which you can do is you can either trigger the functions inside the database helper class. So you have created the functions here, you can directly trigger them, or you can create the separate functions like I prefer to do. So let me tell you how you can do it. So where is the insert function? So it is taking a table row and a row. So I need to pass the column name inside it. Where it is inserting dot, and inside the insert I need to pass a JSON type of data. So database helper dot column ID along with, so I guess I need to assign it to something. So I'll name it to Harsh. So it will be entering the value with the name of Harsh. So it will be inserting that in the particular ID. Let me print the ID. So as you may have seen that I have initialized this particular underscore ID column as my primary key. So it will be generating the values of that particular column like all by itself. So the values will be starting from 0 or 1, I guess. Let's see whatever it is doing. Let me print it. The inserted ID is $i. Removing this white space. So this is the inserting function. So that it will be taking place whenever we'll be clicking on the inserting option. Let's start working on the delete part. So I'll import database helper here, making a function named as deleting. It will be of type async, and inside it we'll be having an integer, and we'll assign the integer name as rows affected, and we'll be assigning the value to await dot database helper dot instance, and after it we need to add dot delete, and we need to pass the function whatever the ID whatever we want to delete. So I can add 1 as of now, but this particular thing will be taking place like the ID whichever we want to delete, we need to pass an ID inside this function. For now, as I am not having any ID or inside in this particular table, so it won't be deleting, it will be providing me with an error. But once if we have various different IDs or various different things stored inside our application, so it will be performing the things accordingly. Let me print the rows affected. Rows affected. Now let's move towards the querying part, importing the database helper here as well. Making or naming it as querying. So querying will also be of type async. ASY I need to make it. And after this I'll be creating a list which will be of type map string. as the querying function which we have coded inside the database helper will be returning a list of type map string dynamic and naming it as query rows. It will be await as it will take some time for the rows to be queried. Database helper dot instance dot query all, and it will be querying all the values. Let's print it down. Queried rows are dollar query rows. So it will be printing the queried rows which we are having inside or which we have queried. Now let's see the updating part. Importing the database helper, naming it as updating. It will be of type A, S, Y, and Z, and inside it I'll be initializing an integer which will be named as update ID, int updated ID, and after it we need to assign it to await database helper dot instance dot update, and the update will be taking the row. So like we have passed inside the insert, we need to pass database dot column ID, database helper dot column ID, and we need to assign it to 3, so it will be updating the particular value of the third ID. Database helper dot column name, so it will be updating the value of that particular column name with, it is providing us, so I need to add dot column name, so it will be updating the value and setting the value to something new. Let me add a semicolon here. Now the errors have gone away and we'll be printing the updated ID. Print, let me make this U as small. Updated ID is $updated ID. And after this, let's add inside the main function or main.dart file all these things which we want our app to have. So for the delete, I'll be deleting these, and I'll start typing deleting. It will provide me with the option. Let me import the file. Importing delete.dart. I'll do the same thing for updating. So running the querying function which we have created for query, and after this for the insert, what I'll be doing is I'll be running the inserting function, adding a comma so the error goes away. So these are the functions which will be running when we are like clicking on the particular these flat buttons which we are having inside our application. Let's wait for a while. So it has now lost the connection to the device. Let me rerun the app. Let's wait for the app to restart. So you can see that the build is completed and the app is installing and launching side by side inside the application. It is connecting to the VM services. So it is providing us with an error of type that future dynamic is not a subtype of this void. Let's see where we are getting this error. Let me open my debug console. Inside the main.dart file on the line number 24. So inside the home page, I guess we need to go. And after this, let's see line number 79, what it is saying. On pressed inserting future dynamic is not a type of type void. So I have figured it out why this error is appearing. So the thing is that inside this deleting or inserting files, we have made the functions here. So for the on press, we don't need to pass these braces along with the functions. So this is the reason why the errors were occurring, or this particular error was displaying inside our application. Let me hot restart it. So you can see that the restart application has been done, and here you can see that we are provided with flat buttons which we were having inside our application. Now when I click on the insert button, it will be inserting a particular thing inside our application, and you can see that it has provided us with the path, so where this application or where this file of the database will be stored. So it is stored inside /data user0 and inside the application package name, and after it is having a folder named as app flutter, and inside my database.dat file. So it has like stored our application inside this particular file which we are having. I guess I need to name it db. Let me hot restart it again. As the database always has an extension of db, by mistake I have named it as dart. And when I click on insert again, you can see that it has provided us the path, which is like the same path along with my database db. When I click on insert again, it will be inserting the value inside the id2. When I click on query, it will be providing us with the values like id1 name query, id2 name Harsh. As inside the inserting, we have passed the static name Harsh, like let me change this Harsh to Lucky, saving it. And when I click on this insert, it will be inserting the value inside id3, and when I click on query, you can see that the id3 is having the name of Lucky stored inside it. Now when I click on this particular update method, so it will be updating the id which we have passed. So inside the updating.dart file, we have passed the column id, so it will be updating the id3 which is named as Lucky and changing the name of this particular id to Khatri. So let me query these things and see if it is updated or not. So when I click on the query button, you can see that it has changed the name of Lucky to Khatri, and when I click on insert again, it will be inserting another field, and querying it, we can see that the fourth field is also inserted. Now when I click on delete, it will be deleting the particular row named as 1. So let's query. So you can see that it has deleted the 1th value, which is the second item, as the what we can say the index of these list starts from 0. So we have passed 1 inside the deleting .dart file. So we have passed 2 inside the deleting.dart file. So it has deleted the item with the id of _id of 2. So you can see that here we are having _id2, but when we are querying it, like the latest value of the query, we can see that the id of 2 is not there. Let's pass 1 to it, save it so that hot reload can take place, and when I press delete, it will be affecting, or it will be deleting the value of id _1. So when I click on query, so you can see that here it is showing me the deleted value. So here it is showing me the values which were not deleted, and here you can see that we are having _id as 1, but on the final update we are not having _id as 1. So these were all the CRUD operations which you can perform inside your Flutter application through the use of SQFLite package, which is a type of persistence database which we use inside our Flutter application. So I hope you have got to learn something new by implementing these type of database inside your application. So make sure to implement this type of database only when you are trying to access, or you are trying to interact with the database large number of times, or large number of events are going to take place, and you don't want to interact the database, or you want the database to be available offline only. So this was all for this session, and if you make some of the apps like implementing these type of database, then make sure to share them on our Discord so that more and more people can see this and can get inspiration and motivation for the apps, from the apps which you are building, and can work on some similar projects like you have did. So this was all for this session. If you have any doubts, then make sure to drop your doubts on Discord. I'll be there to solve your doubts for some time after this session video ends. And thanks everyone for joining in.